It was late, probably around midnight, and the highway was empty. You know those kinds of nights, right? The road stretches out in front of you like a dark tunnel, with nothing but the soft hum of the engine and the distant chirping of crickets keeping you company. Marcus Redding was driving his black SUV, just wanting to get home after a grueling few months undercover. He was an FBI agent, and not just any agent, he was one of the best. But the work had taken its toll, and he was exhausted. The air outside felt heavy, almost like it was thick with tension, and Marcus couldn't shake off this feeling that something was about to go wrong. You ever get that sixth sense, that gut feeling? It was gnawing at him, but he brushed it off. Just get home, he told himself, gripping the wheel a little tighter. But then, in his rearview mirror, he saw the flashing lights, red and blue, swirling in the darkness like a warning. "Here we go," Marcus muttered under his breath. It was a cop. And the thing is, Marcus knew exactly what this was. He'd been in these situations too many times. Even though he was a federal agent, despite his training, despite everything, none of it could hide his skin color. He was a black man in a country where the wrong cop could ruin your life in a heartbeat. And tonight, it looked like he'd found one. The cop's car followed him for a while before finally lighting him up and pulling him over. Marcus sighed and pulled to the side of the road. It was quiet, too quiet. His instincts, honed from years of FBI work, kicked in. He reached for his wallet and badge, making sure they were easy to see. The last thing he needed was to make any sudden movements. You know how it is, one wrong move and things can escalate fast. He rolled down his window, and that's when he saw him. Officer Dale Whitman. Whitman was the type of cop you'd cross the street to avoid. The kind of guy whose face was always set in a sneer, like he'd just smelled something rotten. He approached Marcus's car with his hand resting on his gun, his eyes scanning the vehicle, looking for trouble where there was none. "License and registration," Whitman barked, his voice dripping with hostility. Marcus handed over his documents, including his FBI credentials. "I'm an FBI agent, sir, just headed home after an assignment." You'd think the badge would calm things down, right? I mean, who messes with an FBI agent? But not Whitman. He took one look at the badge, sneered, and tossed it back into the car like it was trash. "FBI, huh? That's cute," Whitman said, leaning in closer, his face inches from Marcus's. "What are you doing out here, boy?" Now, Marcus had dealt with racist cops before, but this guy? He was on a whole different level. Whitman's eyes were cold and predatory, like he'd been waiting for an opportunity like this. Marcus knew that tone. It was the tone of a man who saw him as less than human, a man who had power and enjoyed using it to tear others down. Marcus stayed calm. He'd been trained for situations like this, but the anger bubbling inside him was hard to ignore. "Like I said, I'm an FBI agent. Here's my badge again," Marcus repeated, pushing the badge toward Whitman. He didn't want to escalate things, but the situation was already spiraling. Whitman wasn't having it. He snatched the badge again, but this time he didn't even pretend to look at it. Instead, he threw it onto the passenger seat, his face twisting into a grin that sent a chill down Marcus's spine. "You think I give a damn about your little badge? I've seen guys like you before, probably a fake. You're driving a fancy car, wearing fancy clothes. What are you, a drug dealer? A car thief? You think just because you flash a shiny piece of metal, I'm gonna let you go?" Whitman's hand was still on his gun. The threat was there, hanging in the air like a heavy fog. Marcus could feel his heartbeat in his ears. He thought about his family, about his fellow agents, about how many times he'd been in dangerous situations. But this was different. This wasn't some criminal he could bring to justice. This was a man who wore a badge just like him, but with one major difference. Whitman didn't see Marcus as a fellow law enforcement officer. He saw him as prey. "Step out of the vehicle," Whitman said, his voice colder now, more threatening. Marcus knew better than to argue, but every part of him wanted to resist. He could feel the adrenaline pumping through his veins as he slowly opened the door and stepped out. Whitman's eyes followed his every move, hungry for a reason to act. Before Marcus could even stand straight, Whitman grabbed him by the arm and slammed him against the side of the SUV. Pain shot through Marcus's shoulder, but he gritted his teeth and stayed silent. Whitman twisted his arm behind his back, hard enough that it felt like it was going to pop out of its socket. "See? You guys are all the same," Whitman sneered, pressing Marcus harder against the vehicle. "Think you can get away with anything?" The anger inside Marcus was boiling over now, but he kept his mouth shut. He had to. One wrong word, one wrong move, and this could end with a bullet in his back. Whitman didn't care that Marcus was FBI. He didn't care that Marcus was innocent. All he saw was a black man behind the wheel of a nice car, and that was enough for him to turn this into a nightmare. As Whitman started to pat him down, roughly searching for anything he could use as an excuse, Marcus caught a glimpse of something in the distance. Headlights. Someone was coming, but they were still too far away to be of any help. And as Whitman continued his search, making sure to shove Marcus into the car with every movement, Marcus realized something terrifying. Whitman wasn't going to stop. This wasn't just a routine stop anymore. This was personal, and it was about to get a whole lot worse. The moment Whitman's hands started roughly patting Marcus down, he knew things were about to go from bad to worse. You know when you can just feel the situation turning? That's what this felt like. Every instinct in Marcus's body told him to fight back, but he knew better. The wrong move could cost him everything. He was an FBI agent, sure, but right now, out here on this dark, empty road, that badge meant nothing to Officer Whitman. Just when Marcus thought it couldn't get worse, 2 more squad cars rolled up. The backup had arrived, and these officers looked just as bad as Whitman. They had that same smug, dangerous look in their eyes. The first cop, a big guy with a shaved head, walked up, smirking as he sized Marcus up. "This guy's claiming he's FBI," Whitman spat out, glaring at Marcus like he was something stuck to his shoe. "But I think we've got ourselves a situation here. Looks like a drug runner to me." The second cop, a shorter guy with a mean scowl, didn't even wait for permission. He started rummaging through Marcus's SUV, tossing things around like he owned the place. They didn't have a warrant, and they didn't care. Marcus tried to keep his cool, but inside, the rage was bubbling. These guys weren't cops. They were thugs with badges, looking for an excuse to tear him apart. "You've got no right to search my car," Marcus said through gritted teeth. "Not without a warrant." But Whitman didn't care. He leaned in close, his breath hot and foul on Marcus's face. "You think that badge of yours makes you special? Makes you untouchable?" He sneered, flicking Marcus's FBI badge like it was a joke, then, without warning, slammed his baton into Marcus's ribs. The pain was immediate and intense, like a hot iron being pressed into his side. Marcus doubled over but didn't fall. He wouldn't give Whitman that satisfaction. But Whitman wasn't done. He swung again, harder this time, and Marcus felt something crack inside. His ribs were screaming in agony, but he held his ground. The other officers stood by, grinning like they were watching some sick show. Blow after blow, Whitman continued his assault. The baton came down again and again, each strike sending shockwaves of pain through Marcus's body. His vision blurred, blood running down his face, but he didn't go down. They wanted him broken, begging, but Marcus had too much fight left in him for that. And then, Whitman did the unthinkable. He reached for his gun, pulling it slowly from its holster as the other cops looked on, not even bothering to stop him. This was it. This was the moment. Marcus knew what was coming next. Whitman was going to make him just another statistic, another dead black man shot by the police. They'd claim self-defense, plant something in the SUV, and that would be the end of it. But Marcus wasn't going down like that. With lightning-fast reflexes, he grabbed Whitman's wrist, twisting it hard enough to make the gun drop. The look of shock on Whitman's face was priceless, like he couldn't believe Marcus had the nerve to fight back. The gun clattered to the ground, and for a moment, everything stopped. The other cops froze, unsure of what to do without their ringleader in control. Marcus stood tall, blood dripping down his face, his breathing ragged. "You think you can kill me and get away with it?" he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "You messed with the wrong man tonight." Before Whitman could react, another car pulled up. It was a black SUV, just like Marcus's, but this wasn't more local cops. It was FBI Director Wilson, stepping out of the car with a calm, commanding presence that immediately shifted the power dynamics. Whitman's face went pale as he realized who had just arrived. "Agent Redding," Wilson said, his voice steady. "Stand down. We've got it from here." Marcus, still filled with adrenaline, let go of Whitman. The power had shifted, and now Whitman and his crew were about to face real justice. As Marcus released Whitman's wrist, the air was thick with tension. Whitman stumbled back, clearly shaken. His gun was on the ground, his authority shattered in front of his men. For the first time, Marcus saw real fear in his eyes. This wasn't the cocky, racist cop who had slammed him against his car. Now, he was just a man stripped of his power, standing in front of the very person he had tried to destroy. Director Wilson's presence changed everything. The other cops were frozen, their confidence gone. Wilson calmly approached Marcus, his eyes scanning the bloody mess left by Whitman's vicious attack. There was no judgment in Wilson's eyes, just understanding. He knew exactly what had happened here. Whitman, clutching his bruised wrist, tried to regain control of the situation. This man attacked me," he stammered, desperation creeping into his voice. "He's dangerous. He tried to take my gun." But Wilson wasn't buying it. He'd seen enough corrupt cops in his career to know exactly what this was. He walked over to Whitman, towering over him, and spoke in a low, controlled voice. "Officer Whitman, you've been under investigation for months. We've been watching you, documenting your actions. Tonight, you crossed the line." Whitman's face drained of color. His arrogance vanished in an instant. The other officers exchanged nervous glances. They knew the jig was up. Marcus, still catching his breath, wiped the blood from his face and watched as Wilson took control. The pounding in his ribs made every breath a struggle, but there was something deeply satisfying about seeing Whitman crumble under the weight of the consequences he never thought he'd face. This wasn't the ending Whitman had planned for the night. Wilson turned to Marcus. "We'll take it from here, Agent Redding. You did the right thing by holding back. Now, it's time for justice." For a split second, Marcus felt a rush of rage. Was this justice? After what they'd done to him? He'd been beaten, humiliated, and treated like nothing more than a criminal, all because of the color of his skin. His fingers twitched, still aching from the grip on Whitman's wrist, and he imagined, for just a second, what it would have felt like to finish Whitman off, to deliver the same pain he had endured. But Marcus wasn't Whitman. He couldn't be. That's what made him different. He took a deep breath and nodded. "Yeah, it's time for justice," he said, his voice low but steady. The other officers were rounded up by Wilson's team. Handcuffs clicked as they were escorted into the back of the patrol cars, no longer in control of the situation. Whitman tried to plead, to explain, but it was over. There would be no escape for him this time. As Marcus watched them being driven away, the weight of the night settled on him. He'd won, but it didn't feel like a victory. The scars, physical and emotional, were there to stay. The media would have a field day with this, and Whitman's story would be just one in a long line of racist cops being brought down. But for Marcus, it was personal. It was a reminder that no matter how much you achieve, no matter the badge or rank, there are still people out there who will judge you by the color of your skin. That reality, no matter how much justice was served tonight, wasn't going to change. He looked at Wilson, who gave him a respectful nod. "Let's get you checked out, Marcus. You're lucky to be alive." Marcus nodded, the pain still pulsing through his body, but there was a small sense of closure. Tonight wasn't just about surviving. It was about standing up to the system that tried to break him. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.